I'm Sarah, 32 years old, and I was a teacher living in Seattle. I thought I had a normal marriage. Until the day I woke up in a hospital bed and realized my husband's lie was about to be exposed. What the doctor said next saved my life. I'm still shaking as I tell you this story, because even 2 years later, the memories of what he did to me, the pain he caused, the fear I lived with every single day, it still haunts me. But I need to share this. I need you to hear what happened. Because maybe, just maybe, my story will help someone else escape the hell I was living in. Before I tell you how that doctor's words changed everything, please hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support means the world to me. It reminds me that I'm not alone anymore, that there are people out there who care, who listen, who believe survivors like me. So please, take a second to do that. I'll wait. Thank you. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand how I got here. You need to understand that I wasn't always this broken, scared woman lying in a hospital bed with bruises covering my body. There was a time when I smiled, when I laughed, when I actually believed in love. God, I was so naive, so stupid, so blind. I met him 6 years ago at a friend's wedding. He was charming, incredibly charming. He had this smile that could light up a room, and when he looked at me, I felt like I was the only woman in the world. He brought me flowers on our second date. He remembered every little detail I told him about myself. He'd text me good morning every single day and tell me how beautiful I was, how lucky he was to have found me. Everyone told me I'd found the perfect man. My friends were jealous. My mother adored him. My father shook his hand firmly and said, "You take care of my daughter, son." And he promised he would. He looked my father right in the eye and promised. We got married 2 years after we met. The wedding was beautiful, everything I'd ever dreamed of. I wore a white dress. He wore a black tux. And when we said our vows, I actually believed every word. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Those words, God, those words would come back to haunt me. Because the worst part, it came so much sooner than I ever could have imagined. It started 6 months after the wedding. 6 months. That's all it took for the mask to slip, for the real him to emerge from behind that charming smile. We were having dinner, just a normal Tuesday night. I'd made chicken parmesan, his favorite, but apparently I'd overcooked it. He took one bite and his face changed. It was like watching a switch flip. 1 second he was my husband, the next second he was someone I didn't recognize. Someone whose eyes went cold and dark and filled with rage. "You can't even cook a simple meal, right?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What kind of wife are you?" I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "Honey, it's just a little overdone. I can make something else." That's when it happened. That's when his hand connected with my face for the first time. The slap echoed through our kitchen, and I stood there in shock, my hand pressed against my burning cheek, unable to process what had just happened. He'd hit me. My husband had hit me. "Don't you dare laugh at me," he hissed. "Don't you ever disrespect me like that again." I should have left right then. I should have walked out that door and never looked back. But I didn't. You want to know why? Because 30 seconds later, he started crying. Actual tears streaming down his face, dropping to his knees, grabbing my hands and apologizing over and over again. "I'm so sorry, baby. I don't know what came over me. Work has been so stressful, and I just snapped. I would never hurt you. You know I love you. Please forgive me. Please. It will never happen again. I promise it will never happen again." And I believed him. God help me, I believed him. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that everyone makes mistakes, that he was under so much pressure at work. I made excuses for him. I blamed myself. Maybe I shouldn't have laughed. Maybe I should have been more careful with dinner. Maybe I'd provoked him somehow without realizing it. The next day, he came home with 2 dozen roses and a diamond bracelet. He took me to my favorite restaurant. He held my hand across the table and told me I was the most important thing in his life. And I smiled. I actually smiled and thanked him for the gifts, for the dinner, for loving me. I covered the bruise on my cheek with makeup and pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It was never going to be fine again. The second time it happened was 3 weeks later. I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. He'd asked me that morning, and I'd gotten busy with work and completely forgot. Such a simple, stupid thing. But when he came home and realized I hadn't done it, he grabbed me by the hair and slammed me against the wall. I felt the air leave my lungs, felt the pain explode through my back and shoulders. He held me there, his face inches from mine, his hand twisted in my hair. "You have one job as my wife," he spat. "One job. To take care of me. To do what I ask. And you can't even do that." Then he shoved me to the ground and walked away like nothing had happened. I lay there on the floor, crying, confused, terrified. This wasn't my husband. This wasn't the man I'd married. But it was. He was both men, the charming, loving husband in public, and the monster behind closed doors. After that, it became a pattern, a sick, twisted cycle that I got trapped in. He'd hurt me, then he'd apologize. He'd buy me gifts, be sweet and loving for a few days or maybe a week, and then something would set him off again and the violence would return. Each time it was worse than the last. Each time I told myself it would be the last time. Each time I was wrong. He started isolating me from my friends. At first, it was subtle. "Do you really need to go out with the girls tonight? I thought we could spend time together." Then it became more controlling. "Why are you always on the phone with your friends? Am I not enough for you?" Eventually, he'd fly into a rage whenever I made plans with anyone. "You're choosing them over me? Your own husband?" So I stopped making plans. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped going out. It was easier than dealing with his anger. My family was next. He'd pick fights right before family gatherings, making sure I was too upset or too bruised to go. "Tell them you're sick," he'd command. "Tell them you have the flu or something." So I did. I made excuses. I canceled plans. My mother started calling less frequently, hurt that I kept bailing on family dinners. I could hear it in her voice, the disappointment, the confusion. But what could I tell her? That my husband was beating me? That I was trapped? That I was terrified? I couldn't. I was too ashamed, too embarrassed. How do you admit to your family that you've become that woman? The one you always swore you'd never be? The one who stays with a man who hurts her? I thought I was stronger than that. I thought if I was ever in that situation, I'd leave immediately. But when you're living it, when you're in the middle of it, everything is different. Everything is complicated and confusing and absolutely terrifying. The beatings became more frequent. What started as once every few weeks became once a week, then multiple times a week, then daily. Every single day, he found a reason to hurt me. The house wasn't clean enough. Dinner wasn't ready on time. I'd looked at him the wrong way. I'd said something that annoyed him. I'd breathed too loudly. It didn't matter what I did or didn't do. Nothing was ever right. Nothing was ever good enough. He'd punch me in the stomach where the bruises wouldn't show. He'd pull my hair until I thought he'd rip it from my scalp. He'd twist my arms behind my back until I heard something pop. He'd kick me when I was down on the ground. And the whole time, he'd tell me it was my fault, that I deserved it. That if I just listened to him, if I just did what I was supposed to do, he wouldn't have to discipline me. Discipline. That's what he called it. Like I was a child who needed to be taught a lesson. Like his violence was somehow justified. Somehow my fault. I started wearing long sleeves even in summer. Turtlenecks to hide the fingerprints around my neck. Sunglasses to cover the black eyes. Makeup. So much makeup. Layered thick to hide the bruises that painted my skin in shades of purple, blue, yellow, green. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I'd lost weight because I was too anxious to eat. My eyes had this hollow, haunted look. I looked like a ghost. I felt like one too. I tried to leave once, just once. It was after a particularly bad night when he'd beaten me so badly I couldn't walk properly for 2 days. I packed a bag while he was at work, took what little money I had saved, and went to a motel across town. I felt this surge of hope, of freedom. I'd done it. I'd finally escaped. But he found me. I don't know how, but he found me within 6 hours. He showed up at that motel room door, and when I opened it, thinking it was housekeeping, there he was. The look on his face? I'll never forget it. Pure rage mixed with this possessive madness. He dragged me back home by my arm, his fingers digging into my skin so hard they left bruises. Once we were inside, he locked the door and beat me worse than he ever had before. He hit me with closed fists, over and over, telling me I belonged to him, that I was his wife, that I had no right to leave, that if I ever tried to run again, he'd kill me. And I believed him. I absolutely believed him. "You're nothing without me," he screamed in my face. "No one else would want you. Look at you. You're pathetic, weak, worthless. Your family doesn't even call you anymore. Your friends have forgotten about you. I'm all you have. Do you understand me? I am all you have." And in that moment, I believed that too. I believed I was trapped forever, that this was my life now, that I'd made my choice when I married him and now I had to live with the consequences. I stopped thinking about leaving. I stopped hoping for anything better. I just survived, day by day, hour by hour, trying not to do anything that would set him off, walking on eggshells in my own home. He'd threaten me constantly. "If you tell anyone, I'll say you're crazy. No one will believe you. You have no proof. It's your word against mine, and I'm a respected member of this community. You're just a hysterical woman who can't handle her marriage." And he was right. I had no proof. He was careful. He hurt me where it wouldn't show, or where I could easily cover it up. He was smart about it, calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing. The financial control got worse too. He took over all our accounts. I had no access to money. He gave me a small allowance for groceries, and I had to bring him receipts for everything I bought. If I was even $1 over, he'd accuse me of stealing from him, and the punishment would be severe. I couldn't work anymore. He'd forced me to quit my teaching job months ago, claiming he made enough money and that my place was at home. Without my own income, without any savings, without any financial independence, I was completely dependent on him, completely under his control. This went on for 3 years. 3 years of daily abuse, 3 years of living in fear, 3 years of going to bed not knowing if I'd wake up the next morning, 3 years of wishing I wouldn't. There were nights I thought about ending it myself. The pain, the fear, the hopelessness, it was too much. I'd stand in the bathroom with a bottle of pills, thinking how easy it would be to just swallow them all and drift away into nothingness. No more pain, no more fear, no more him. But I couldn't do it. Some small part of me, some tiny spark that he hadn't completely extinguished, held on. Held on to the memory of who I used to be, who I could be again if I could just survive long enough to escape. Then came the day that changed everything. The day referenced in the title you clicked on. The day I passed out. The day he took me to the hospital. The day his lie started to unravel. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were always bad. He'd come home from work in a foul mood every Thursday, something about weekly meetings with his boss that stressed him out. And when he was stressed, I paid the price. I'd made dinner exactly the way he liked it. Steak, medium rare, mashed potatoes, green beans. I'd set the table nicely, had his favorite beer waiting. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could avoid his anger that night if everything was perfect. But nothing was ever perfect enough. He took one bite of the steak and spit it out. "This is disgusting. What did you do to it?" I cooked it exactly how you like it," I stammered, my heart already racing with fear. "Medium rare, just like always." "It's overdone," he said, his voice going cold. "You can't do anything right, can you?" He stood up, and I knew what was coming. I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. He grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the refrigerator. My head hit the metal with a sickening thud, and I saw stars. "I work all day to provide for you," he growled, his face inches from mine, his hand squeezing my throat tighter. "And this is the thanks I get? A ruined dinner?" He threw me to the ground and started kicking me. My ribs, my back, my legs. I curled into a ball, trying to protect my vital organs, crying and begging him to stop, but he didn't stop. He was beyond rage, beyond reason. He kicked me again, and I felt something crack in my chest. The pain was blinding. Then he pulled me up by my hair and started punching me in the face. I felt my nose break, felt blood pouring down my face, filling my mouth with a metallic taste. One punch connected with my temple, and the world started to spin. My vision blurred. I heard him screaming at me, but his voice sounded far away, like I was underwater. "You worthless piece of trash. You ruin everything. I should have never married you." Another punch. Another explosion of pain. And then, nothing. Everything went black. I didn't feel myself hit the floor. I didn't feel anything. I just disappeared into the darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. It could have been minutes or hours. But when I started to come to, I wasn't on the kitchen floor anymore. I was moving, jostling. I tried to open my eyes, but one of them was swollen shut. Through my one working eye, I could barely make out that I was in a car, his car, and he was driving, muttering to himself in panic. "Shit, shit, shit. Wake up. Come on, wake up. Don't you dare die on me. Not now. Not like this." I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't work properly. Everything hurt. Every breath sent sharp pains through my chest. I must have made some sound, though, because he glanced back at me in the rearview mirror. I was in the back seat, I realized. Lying down. "Stay with me," he said, and for a moment, he actually sounded concerned, worried. But then I heard what he said next, and I realized this wasn't about me. This was never about me. This was about him covering his tracks. Okay, I've got this." She fell down the stairs. That's it. She fell down the stairs and hit her head. I came home from work and found her. I'm a concerned husband rushing his wife to the hospital. That's the story. She fell down the stairs. He kept repeating it over and over, practicing his lie, fine-tuning it, making sure he had all the details right. I lay there in the back seat, drifting in and out of consciousness, listening to him construct the narrative that would explain away my injuries. The stairs. Of course. It's always stairs or walking into doors or being clumsy. The oldest excuse in the abuser's handbook. Through the haze of pain and confusion, I felt something. A tiny spark of hope. He was taking me to the hospital. I'd be around other people. Doctors, nurses, people who might ask questions. People who might see through his lie. This could be my chance. Maybe my only chance. But that hope was immediately crushed by fear. What if they didn't believe me? What if they believed him instead? He was right there with me. He'd control what I said, who I talked to. And even if I did manage to tell someone the truth, what then? He'd said he'd kill me if I ever tried to leave. What would he do if I exposed him? If I got him in trouble? I must have passed out again because the next thing I knew, there were bright lights and voices and people moving around me. The emergency room. I was on a gurney, being wheeled down a hallway. I tried to focus, tried to understand what was happening, but everything was so confusing, so painful. I heard his voice, loud and clear, playing the role of concerned husband perfectly. "Please help her." I came home from work and found her at the bottom of the stairs. She must have fallen. There was blood everywhere. "Please, you have to help my wife." Such a good performance. Such genuine-sounding panic and worry. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't just lived through what really happened, I would have believed him myself. They transferred me to a bed in the ER. A nurse started checking my vitals, while a doctor examined me. He was hovering nearby, playing his part beautifully, holding my hand, stroking my hair gently, so gently, nothing like the way he'd yanked it earlier, telling me everything would be okay, telling the medical staff how worried he was about me. The doctor started asking questions. "Can you tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth, looked at my husband standing right there, and felt the words die in my throat. His eyes were locked on mine, and even though his expression looked concerned and loving, I could see the warning in his gaze. "Don't you dare. Don't you say a word." Before I could respond, he jumped in. She fell down the stairs. I wasn't home when it happened, but when I got there, she was unconscious at the bottom. We have hardwood stairs, and she must have slipped. The doctor nodded, making notes, but the nurse, a woman probably in her 50s with kind eyes, kept looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Concern? Suspicion? I couldn't tell. "Ma'am, can you tell us in your own words what happened?" the nurse asked gently. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to tell them everything, but the fear was too strong. He was right there, listening to every word. If I said anything, if I told the truth, what would he do to me once we got home? I don't remember, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I remember being at the top of the stairs, and then nothing. He squeezed my hand, and to anyone watching, it would have looked like a gesture of comfort and support, but I felt how hard he was squeezing, the pressure of his fingers. Another warning. "It's okay, baby," he said softly. "You're safe now. They're going to take good care of you." The doctor ordered X-rays and a CT scan. "We need to check for fractures and internal bleeding. Can you tell me if you're experiencing pain anywhere specific?" "Everywhere," I managed to say. "Everything hurts." They had to cut off my shirt to examine me properly, and that's when I saw the nurse's expression change. She'd uncovered my torso, and even I could see what she was looking at. Bruises. Everywhere. My entire torso was covered in bruises of different colors, fresh purple ones from tonight, yellowing ones from last week, greenish ones from the week before, a road map of abuse painted across my skin. The doctor's demeanor changed too. He looked at the bruises, then at my husband, then at the nurse. Something unspoken passed between them. "These bruises," the doctor said carefully, "they appear to be in various stages of healing. Some are quite old." My husband didn't miss a beat. "She's always been clumsy. She bruises easily, too. She's always bumping into things, tripping over stuff. I tell her to be more careful, but you know how it is." He laughed. He actually laughed, like my injuries were just a cute quirk of my personality, like I was some silly, accident-prone woman who couldn't walk through her own house without hurting herself. But the doctor wasn't laughing. Neither was the nurse. They exchanged another look, and then the nurse said, "We're going to take you for those scans now. Sir, you'll need to wait here." "I want to go with her," he protested. "She's my wife. She needs me with her." "Hospital policy," the nurse said firmly. "You can wait in the family waiting room. We'll come get you when she's back." I saw frustration flash across his face, but he couldn't argue without looking suspicious. Okay, I'll wait. Baby, I'll be right here when you get back." I'm not going anywhere. That's what I was afraid of. They wheeled me away, down another long corridor to the radiology department. The nurse stayed with me the whole time, and once we were away from the ER, away from him, she leaned down close to me. "Honey," she said quietly, "those bruises didn't come from a fall down the stairs. I've been a nurse for 30 years. I know what abuse looks like." Tears started streaming down my face. I couldn't hold them back anymore. "It's okay," she continued. "You're safe right now. He can't get to you here. But I need you to tell me the truth. Did he do this to you?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her everything. But the fear was still there, paralyzing me. I can't. He'll kill me. You don't understand. If I say anything, he'll kill me. We won't let that happen, she promised. We have security. We have resources. We can help you. But you have to tell the truth. The X-ray technician came in then, and the conversation had to stop. They took images of my head, my chest, my ribs. Then they took me for a CT scan. The whole time, my mind was racing. Should I tell them? Could I tell them? What would happen if I did? What would happen if I didn't? When they brought me back to the ER, I was in a different room than before. A private room instead of the open bay. My husband was there, of course, standing by the bed. That fake, concerned look still plastered on his face. How is she? He asked. What did the tests show? The doctor will be in shortly to discuss the results, the nurse said coolly. The minutes that followed felt like hours. He held my hand, stroked my hair, played his part perfectly. But every few seconds, when he was sure no one was looking, he'd lean in close and whisper warnings in my ear. Remember what I told you. You fell down the stairs. That's all. You say anything different, and you know what will happen. I'll make what I did tonight look like nothing compared to what I'll do to you. Do you understand me? I nodded slightly, too terrified to do anything else. Then the doctor came back in, holding a tablet with my test results. And this is where everything changed. This is where my life, my nightmare, took a turn I never could have anticipated. This is the moment from the thumbnail. The moment that saved my life. The doctor looked at me, then at my husband, then back at me. His expression was serious, professional, but I could see something else there too. Determination, maybe, or anger. I couldn't tell. Ma'am, he said, addressing me directly, the results of your CT scan and X-rays show several concerning injuries. You have a concussion, a broken nose, 3 fractured ribs, and evidence of previous fractures that healed improperly. He paused, and in that pause, I could feel my husband tense beside me. His hand tightened on mine. The doctor continued, his eyes never leaving mine. Ma'am, these injuries show a clear pattern of repeated physical trauma over an extended period of time. The bruising on your body suggests multiple incidents occurring over weeks, possibly months. The fractures are in various stages of healing. These injuries are not consistent with a fall down the stairs. I watched my husband's face, and that's when it happened. He froze, completely froze. All the color drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd met him, he had no response. No lie prepared. No charm to fall back on. He just stood there, frozen, as his carefully constructed story crumbled around him. The doctor wasn't done. These are clear indicators of ongoing domestic violence. The injury patterns are unmistakable to medical professionals trained in trauma assessment. I've already contacted hospital security and social services. I need to speak with you alone, without your husband present. Now wait just a minute, my husband started, his voice rising, that charming mask finally slipping to reveal the monster underneath. But the doctor cut him off. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room immediately. This is not a negotiation. She's my wife. You can't keep me from my wife. Actually, I can. And I am. Security. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway like they'd been waiting just outside. They probably had been. My husband looked at me, and the rage in his eyes was terrifying. But he couldn't do anything. Not here, not in front of witnesses. He was trapped, exposed, and he knew it. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, trying to regain control of the situation. She did fall down the stairs. Tell them. Sarah, tell them what happened. Tell them you're just clumsy, that you bruise easily, that... Sir, you need to leave now, one of the security guards said firmly, stepping forward. I'm not leaving without my wife. Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, we will escort you out and contact the police. Your choice. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out his next move. Then he seemed to make a decision. He'd leave, but he'd make sure I knew this wasn't over. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. I'll go. But Sarah, remember who you belong to. Remember what I told you. I'll be waiting for you. Right outside. I'll be waiting. The security guards escorted him out, and for the first time in 3 years, I was in a room without him. I could breathe. I could think. I could speak without fear of immediate retaliation. The moment the door closed, I completely broke down. All the tears I'd been holding back, all the fear, all the pain, it came pouring out of me in great, heaving sobs. My whole body shook with the force of it, and even though my ribs screamed in protest, I couldn't stop crying. The nurse was there immediately, holding my hand, telling me it was okay, that I was safe. The doctor pulled up a chair beside my bed and waited patiently for me to calm down enough to speak. I need you to tell me the truth, he said gently, once my sobs had quieted to hiccups. Did your husband do this to you? And finally, I said the words I'd been too terrified to say for 3 years. Yes. That one word opened the floodgates. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. The whole story came pouring out the first slap, the escalation, the daily beatings, the control, the isolation, the threats. I told them everything, every horrible detail of the past 3 years. And they listened. They believed me. A domestic violence advocate was called in. Her name was Maria, and she had kind eyes and a gentle voice. She sat with me and explained my options, my rights, what resources were available. She told me I didn't have to go home with him, that I could file a police report, that there were safe places I could go. But he's outside, I said, my voice shaking. He said he's waiting for me. He meant it. He'll be out there, and if I try to leave, he won't get near you. Maria assured me. Security is already aware of the situation. The police are on their way. And even if he tries to approach you, he'll be arrested for violating hospital security protocols. You don't understand, I insisted, feeling panic rise in my chest. You don't know what he's capable of. He told me if I ever told anyone, if I ever tried to leave, he'd kill me, and he meant it. I know he did. I do understand, Maria said softly. I was where you are 15 years ago. My ex-husband put me in the hospital just like yours did to you. And just like you, I was terrified to speak up. But I did, and I survived. And you will too. A police officer arrived about 20 minutes later. Detective Morrison, a woman in her 40s, with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She took my statement, photographed all my injuries, and documented every detail I could remember. The medical records would serve as evidence. The photographs would serve as evidence. My testimony would serve as evidence. We have enough to arrest him right now, she told me. Assault and battery, at minimum, with more charges likely to follow as we investigate further. Is that what you want? What I wanted? For 3 years, I hadn't been allowed to want anything. For 3 years, my wants, my needs, my very existence had been controlled by him. And now someone was asking me what I wanted? Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. Yes, I want him arrested. I want him to pay for what he did to me. I want him to never be able to hurt me again. Then that's what we'll do, Detective Morrison said. He's still in the hospital waiting room. We'll take him into custody now. And we'll also be issuing an emergency protective order, which means he legally cannot come near you, contact you, or attempt to communicate with you in any way. If he violates that order, he goes straight to jail. They asked if I had anywhere safe to go. I told them about my parents, who I hadn't spoken to properly in over a year because he'd isolated me from them. Maria offered to call them for me, to explain the situation. They're going to be so disappointed in me, I said, fresh tears streaming down my face. They're going to think I'm so stupid for staying with him, for letting this happen. They're not going to think that. Maria interrupted gently. They're going to be relieved that you're alive and that you're finally getting help. Trust me, The people who love you, they just want you safe. She was right. When my mother answered the phone and Maria explained what had happened, I heard my mother scream, not in anger at me, but in horror at what I'd been living through. Within 30 minutes, both my parents were at the hospital, rushing into my room with tears streaming down their faces. My mother grabbed my hand so gently, like she was afraid I might break. "Oh, baby," she sobbed. "Oh, my baby girl. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you say something?" "I couldn't," I whispered. "I was so scared. And I was so ashamed. I didn't want you to know that I'd let this happen to me." "You didn't let anything happen," my father said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. He did this. He's the monster, not you." They stayed with me while I gave my statement to the police. They were there when Detective Morrison came back to tell me that my husband had been arrested in the parking lot. He'd actually tried to run when he saw the police approaching him, which added evading arrest to his charges. They'd found texts on his phone, threats he'd sent me, messages to his friends bragging about keeping me in line, even photos he'd taken of me after some of the beatings. Evidence. So much evidence. I was admitted to the hospital overnight for observation because of the concussion. My parents stayed with me the entire time. My mother held my hand through the night while I drifted in and out of sleep, plagued by nightmares of him coming back, of him finding me, of him making good on his threats. But he didn't come back. He couldn't. He was in jail. The next morning, Maria returned with information about a domestic violence shelter where I could stay. My parents wanted me to come home with them, but Maria explained that it might not be safe. He knew where they lived. And even with the protective order, desperate abusers sometimes violated those orders with deadly consequences. The shelter was confidential, secure, and staffed with people trained to help survivors like me. They had counselors, legal advocates, and resources to help me rebuild my life. It was decided that I would go there once I was discharged from the hospital. Over the next few weeks, everything happened so fast. The district attorney's office charged him with multiple counts of assault and battery, domestic violence, and false imprisonment. The evidence against him was overwhelming my medical records. The photographs, the statements from the doctor and nurses who'd treated me, the texts on his phone, even testimony from neighbors who'd heard me screaming. His bail was set high, but I was terrified he'd post it somehow. I lived in fear every day that he'd get out, that he'd find me, that he'd make good on his promise to kill me. But he didn't make bail. His parents refused to help him, apparently horrified when they learned what their son had done. His friends distanced themselves. He was alone, just like he'd made me feel for 3 years. I started therapy at the shelter, twice a week at first, then 3 times a week. My therapist, Dr. Chen, specialized in trauma and PTSD. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just abuse, it was torture. Systematic, calculated torture designed to break me down, to destroy my sense of self, to make me believe I deserved it. "You survived," she told me during one of our early sessions. "Do you understand how strong you had to be to survive what you went through? Most people can't even imagine enduring that level of sustained trauma. But you did. You survived, and now you get to heal." But healing was harder than I ever imagined. The physical injuries healed relatively quickly, my ribs mended, my nose was set properly, the bruises faded. But the psychological damage? That ran so much deeper. I had nightmares every single night, panic attacks whenever I heard footsteps behind me. I'd flinch if someone moved too quickly near me. I couldn't be in a room with the door closed. I couldn't stand having my back to a doorway. I was constantly on alert, constantly scanning for danger, constantly waiting for him to appear. The other women at the shelter understood. They'd lived through their own versions of hell. We'd sit together in the common room at night, sharing our stories, crying together, supporting each other. There was no judgment there. No one asked why we stayed or why we didn't leave sooner. We all knew the answers to those questions were complicated, painful, and deeply personal. I reconnected with my family during this time. They visited me at the shelter as often as they were allowed. My mother cried every time she saw me, apologizing over and over for not realizing what was happening, for not pushing harder when I'd canceled plans or made excuses. "You have nothing to apologize for, Mom," I told her. "He was good at hiding it, and I was good at pretending everything was fine. This wasn't your fault." My father was different. He didn't cry in front of me, but I could see the rage and pain in his eyes. "I want 5 minutes alone with him," he'd say, his hands clenching into fists. "Just 5 minutes, that's all I need." "Dad, no. He's not worth it. He's going to prison. That's justice enough." But was it? I wasn't sure. No amount of prison time could give me back the 3 years he'd stolen from me. No sentence could erase the trauma, the fear, the pain. But it was something. It was accountability. It was him finally facing consequences for what he'd done. The trial was scheduled for 6 months after his arrest. 6 months of waiting, of preparing, of reliving every horrible moment so I could testify against him. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Hayes, met with me multiple times to prepare me for what to expect. "He's going to have a lawyer," she warned me. "That lawyer is going to try to discredit you, to make it seem like you're lying or exaggerating. They might bring up your mental health, your emotional state. They might try to paint you as unstable or vindictive. Are you prepared for that?" Was I? I didn't know, but I knew I had to do this. I had to face him in court. I had to tell my story, not just for me, but for every other woman who'd ever suffered in silence. For every victim who was too afraid to speak up. "I'm ready," I said. Even though I wasn't sure I was. "I'll do whatever it takes." Those 6 months were some of the hardest of my life. I was living in the shelter, attending therapy, trying to process 3 years of trauma while simultaneously preparing to face my abuser in court. I filed for divorce immediately, an emergency divorce on grounds of abuse. He tried to contest it from jail, tried to drag it out, tried to maintain some control over me even from behind bars. But the evidence was too strong. The divorce was granted within 3 months. I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I got a part-time job at a bookstore near the shelter. It was quiet, peaceful work. I was surrounded by stories, by words, by the possibility of different endings than the one I'd been living. My coworkers were kind and didn't ask too many questions about why I sometimes jumped at sudden noises or why I always positioned myself where I could see the door. I reconnected with my old friends. It was awkward at first. They didn't know what to say, how to act around me. They felt guilty for not realizing what was happening, for not being there for me. But slowly, carefully, we rebuilt those bridges. They started inviting me to things again, coffee dates, movie nights, dinner at someone's apartment, small things that felt monumental to me. I was reclaiming my life, my relationships, my identity, but I was also terrified because I knew the trial was coming. I knew I'd have to see him again. I knew I'd have to sit in a courtroom and recount every horrible thing he'd done to me while he sat there watching me, listening to me expose him. The day of the trial finally arrived. I walked into that courthouse with my parents on either side of me, with Maria from the domestic violence shelter, with Detective Morrison, with Dr. Chen. I had an army of supporters, but I'd never felt more alone. Because at the end of the day, I was the one who had to take that stand. I was the one who had to face him. The courtroom was cold and sterile. I took my seat in the gallery and waited for them to bring him in. When they did, I felt like I couldn't breathe. He was in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, but he looked the same. That same face that had smiled at me on our wedding day, that had whispered loving words and then screamed hateful ones, that had kissed me gently and then beat me savagely. He looked at me, made direct eye contact, and even though he was in custody, even though there were guards and lawyers and a judge, I felt that old familiar fear rise up in my chest. He had this slight smirk on his face, this look that said he still had power over me, that I was still his to control. But then I looked around the courtroom at all the people who were there to support me. My parents, my friends, the medical staff who'd saved me, the police who'd arrested him, the prosecutor who was fighting for me. And I realized something. He didn't have power over me anymore. Not really. Yes, he'd hurt me. Yes, he'd traumatized me. Yes, I'd probably carry those scars for the rest of my life. But I was still here. I'd survived. And I was about to make sure he paid for what he'd done. The prosecution presented their case first. They showed the jury photographs of my injuries. They showed the medical records, documenting years of abuse. They called the ER doctor who'd examined me that night, who testified about the pattern of injuries consistent with ongoing domestic violence. They called the nurse who'd comforted me, who'd encouraged me to tell the truth. They called Detective Morrison, who testified about the evidence found on his phone, about his attempt to flee when approached by police. Then it was my turn to testify. Walking up to that witness stand was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My legs felt like they might give out. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. I was sworn in. And then Jennifer Hayes began asking me questions. Please state your name for the record. Sarah Michelle Thompson. And what is your relationship to the defendant? He was my husband. We're divorced now. Can you tell the jury how long you were married? 3 years. And during those 3 years, did the defendant ever physically harm you? I looked at the jury, 12 strangers who would decide his fate, 12 people who needed to hear my truth. I took a deep breath. Yes, he hurt me every single day for 3 years. I told them everything, every horrible detail. The first slap, the escalation, the cycle of abuse, the isolation, the control, the daily beatings, the threats. The time I tried to leave and he found me. The night he beat me so badly I passed out and he took me to the hospital lying about what happened. I cried through most of my testimony. The prosecutor handed me tissues. The judge called for breaks when my panic attacks got too severe. But I kept going. I kept talking. Because this was my chance to be heard, to be believed, to get justice. Then came the cross-examination. His defense attorney, a man in an expensive suit with slicked back hair, approached me with a condescending smile. Mrs. Thompson, or I suppose it's Miss Thompson now, isn't it? You've testified that my client abused you for 3 years. That's a very long time. Why didn't you leave sooner? There it was. The question every abuse survivor hears. The question that implies it's somehow our fault for not leaving, as if leaving was ever that simple. I was afraid, I said quietly. Afraid of what? Afraid he'd kill me. He told me multiple times that if I ever tried to leave, he'd kill me, and I believed him. But you could have called the police at any time, couldn't you? He controlled everything, my phone, my money, my access to the outside world. And even if I had managed to call the police, I was terrified they wouldn't believe me, or that he'd hurt me even worse when they left. Isn't it true that you never sought medical attention for any of these alleged injuries until the night in question? Because he wouldn't let me. And because I was ashamed. Because I thought it was my fault somehow. Because he'd convinced me that no one would believe me anyway. Isn't it possible, Miss Thompson, that these injuries were accidental? That perhaps you are, as my client suggested, simply clumsy? I felt anger surge through me, hot and bright. How dare he? How dare he sit there and suggest that I'd beaten myself black and blue, that I'd broken my own ribs, fractured my own nose, that I'd somehow accidentally created a pattern of trauma spanning 3 years. No, I said firmly. That is not possible. Your client beat me. He punched me, kicked me, strangled me, threw me against walls, pulled my hair, twisted my arms. He did this deliberately, repeatedly, systematically. These were not accidents. This was torture. The defense attorney tried a few more tactics, suggesting I was mentally unstable, implying I was lying for attention or money, questioning why I'd married him in the first place if he was so terrible. But I didn't back down. I answered every question truthfully, and I could see the jury's expressions shifting from neutral to sympathetic to outright angry on my behalf. When I was finally dismissed from the stand, I felt like I'd run a marathon. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also oddly empowered. I'd done it. I'd faced him. I'd told my truth. And I'd survived. The defense put on their case next. My ex-husband testified, of course. He sat there in that witness stand and lied through his teeth. He claimed I was mentally unstable, that I'd hurt myself and blamed him, that I was vindictive because he'd wanted to end the marriage. He painted himself as the victim, as a man whose crazy wife had fabricated abuse claims to ruin his life. But the evidence didn't support his story. The medical records didn't lie. The photographs didn't lie. The pattern of injuries spanning years didn't lie. And when the prosecution cross-examined him, he got flustered, contradicted himself, and eventually lost his temper on the stand, giving the jury a glimpse of the rage I'd lived with for 3 years. The trial lasted a week. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, and when they came back with their verdict, I held my mother's hand so tightly, I probably hurt her. In the case of the State versus Thomas Mitchell Thompson, on the charge of assault and battery in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of domestic violence with aggravated circumstances, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. 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 He was found guilty on all counts. I watched his face as the verdict was read, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not anger, not rage, but actual fear, because he was finally facing consequences. Real, unavoidable consequences. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The judge allowed me to give a victim impact statement before determining his sentence. I'd written it carefully, revised it multiple times with Dr. Chen's help. And when the day came, I stood before that judge and I read every word. Your Honor, my name is Sarah Thompson, and Thomas Thompson stole 3 years of my life. He didn't just hurt me physically, though the scars from that will probably never fully fade. He hurt me psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. He destroyed my sense of self, my confidence, my ability to trust. He made me believe I was worthless, that I deserved the abuse, that no one would ever believe me or care about what was happening to me. For 3 years, I lived in constant fear. I walked on eggshells in my own home. I went to sleep not knowing if I'd survive the night. I isolated myself from everyone who loved me because he'd convinced me I didn't deserve their love. I became a ghost of the person I used to be. But I want you to know, Your Honor, that I survived. Despite everything he did to try to break me, to destroy me, I survived. And I'm here today to make sure he's held accountable for what he did, not just to me, but to send a message to every other abuser out there that domestic violence is not a private matter, it's a crime, and it will be punished. I will carry the trauma of what he did to me for the rest of my life. I have PTSD. I have nightmares. I have panic attacks. I flinch when people move too quickly. I can't be in a room with a closed door. These are the invisible scars he left on me, and they're just as real as the physical ones. But I also want you to know that I'm healing. I'm in therapy. I'm rebuilding my life. I'm reconnecting with my family and friends. I'm reclaiming my identity. I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living. And he doesn't get to take that away from me. Your Honor, I ask that you impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. Not out of vengeance, but out of a belief in justice, in accountability, in protecting other potential victims from experiencing what I experienced. Thank you. When I finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge looked emotional. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, with no possibility of parole, for at least 10 years. Additionally, when he was eventually released, he would have to register as a violent offender, complete anger management, and domestic violence intervention programs. and would have a permanent restraining order keeping him away from me for the rest of our lives. 15 years. It seemed like both too much and not nearly enough, but it was justice. Real, tangible justice. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. But this time, I didn't look away. I stared right back at him, and I saw it the moment he realized he'd truly lost. That he had no power over me anymore. That I'd won. After the sentencing, my life slowly began to return to normal. Or rather, to a new normal. Because I could never go back to who I was before. That Sarah was gone. Lost somewhere in those 3 years of abuse. But a new Sarah was emerging stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more resilient. I moved out of the shelter after about 8 months and got my own apartment. It was small, just a studio, but it was mine. I picked out the furniture. I painted the walls. I hung pictures that I liked. Every decision was mine and mine alone, and that freedom was intoxicating. I continued therapy, working through the trauma layer by layer. Dr. Chen warned me that healing wasn't linear, that I'd have good days and bad days, progress and setbacks. She was right. Some days I felt strong and empowered. Other days I'd curl up in bed and cry, convinced I'd never fully heal. But slowly, gradually, the good days started outnumbering the bad ones. I went back to teaching after about a year. It was terrifying at first, standing in front of a classroom again, being responsible for children's education and well-being, but it was also healing. Those kids didn't know my story. They didn't see me as a victim. They just saw me as their teacher, Miss Thompson, who loved books and always had stickers to give out for good work. I started volunteering at the domestic violence shelter where I'd stayed. I helped other survivors, shared my story when it might help someone else find the courage to leave. I became an advocate, speaking at schools and community centers about the warning signs of abuse, about how to help someone who might be trapped in a violent relationship. My story even made the local news after the trial. Other women reached out to me, sharing their own experiences, thanking me for speaking up. I realized that my pain, my trauma, my survival, it all meant something. It could help others. It could save lives. I reconciled fully with my parents and my friends. Those relationships that had been damaged by his isolation tactics were rebuilt, stronger than before. My mother and I became closer than we'd ever been. My father, still angry about what had happened but proud of my strength, walked with me through my healing journey. I even started dating again, though that was incredibly difficult. Trusting someone new, letting someone get close to me, allowing myself to be vulnerable, it was terrifying. I went through several relationships that didn't work out because I wasn't ready, because the trauma was still too fresh. But I kept trying. I kept putting myself out there. And here's where I am now, 2 years after that horrible night when I passed out on my kitchen floor. 2 years after he took me to the hospital and tried to lie his way out of what he'd done. 2 years after that, doctor looked me in the eye and told me what I already knew but was too afraid to admit, that I was being abused, that it wasn't my fault, that I deserved help. I'm living in a new city now. I changed my name legally, not just going back to my maiden name, but choosing an entirely new last name. A fresh start, a new identity untethered from him. I have a job I love, teaching 3rd grade at an elementary school where the principal knows my history and supports me completely. I have an apartment filled with things that make me happy. I have friendships that are genuine and supportive. I have a relationship with my family that's stronger than ever. I still see Dr. Chen every other week. The trauma doesn't just disappear, you know. It's something I'll probably deal with for the rest of my life. But I have tools now to manage it. I have coping mechanisms. I have a support system. I have hope. He's still in prison. I know because I signed up for notifications through the Victim Services Program. I'll get an alert if he's ever transferred, if his case is reviewed, if he's ever considered for early release. As of now, he has 8 more years minimum before he's eligible for parole. 8 more years where I don't have to worry about him showing up at my door. But even if he gets out eventually, even if that day comes, I'm not afraid anymore. Not like I was, because I know my worth now. I know my strength. I know that I survived the worst thing I could imagine, and I came out the other side, not unchanged, not undamaged, but alive, healing, growing. I want you to understand something if you're watching this and you're in a similar situation. If you're being hurt by someone who claims to love you, if you're making excuses for their behavior, if you're isolated, controlled, afraid, if you're telling yourself it's not that bad, that you're overreacting, that you deserve it, that no one will believe you. You don't deserve it. You never deserved it. It is that bad. You're not overreacting, and people will believe you. I know how terrifying it is to speak up. I know how impossible it seems to leave. I know the fear that paralyzes you, the shame that silences you, the hopelessness that convinces you there's no way out. I know all of it because I lived it. But I also know that there's a way out. There are people who will help you. There are resources available. There are shelters, advocates, police officers, doctors, nurses, therapists, whole armies of people whose job it is to help survivors like us. That doctor who saw through my husband's lie? He saved my life by refusing to look away, by asking the hard questions, by following protocol even though it would have been easier to just accept the story we were giving him. That nurse who whispered encouragement to me, she gave me the courage to finally tell the truth. That domestic violence advocate who sat with me in the hospital, she showed me that there was life after abuse, that healing was possible. These people exist in your community too. They're waiting to help you. But you have to take that first terrifying step. You have to reach out. You have to ask for help. You have to tell someone what's happening to you. I'm not going to lie and tell you it's easy. It's not. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Walking away from an abuser, especially one you loved or still love, is agonizing. The trauma doesn't end the moment you leave in many ways. It's just beginning. The healing process is long and painful and exhausting, but it's worth it. God, it's so worth it. To wake up in the morning and not be afraid. To go through your day without walking on eggshells. To make your own decisions. Spend time with people you love. Do things that make you happy. To reclaim your life, your identity, your sense of self. That's worth every difficult moment of the healing process. And to anyone watching this, who knows someone they suspect is being abused, please, please don't look away. Don't accept excuses about being clumsy or accident-prone. Don't believe stories about falling down stairs or walking into doors. Ask the hard questions. Create a safe space for them to tell you the truth. Let them know you believe them. You support them. You'll help them. You might save a life. You might be that person who makes the difference, who gives someone the courage to finally escape. Look for the warning signs. If someone you know has suddenly isolated themselves from friends and family, if they're always making excuses about bruises or injuries, if their partner is overly controlling, constantly checking on them, never letting them go anywhere alone, if they seem afraid of their partner, if they've changed from outgoing to withdrawn, if they've lost their spark, these are red flags. Don't ignore them. If you're in immediate danger right now, if you need help, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START to 88788. These services are free, confidential, and available 24/7. They can help you create a safety plan, find resources in your area, and escape safely. If you're not in immediate danger but you're being abused, start documenting everything. Take photos of injuries. Keep a journal of incidents. Save threatening texts or emails. Tell someone you trust what's happening. These things will help you later if you decide to press charges or need to prove abuse in divorce proceedings. Create a safety plan. Know where you'll go if you need to leave quickly. Keep important documents, some cash, and essentials in a bag that you can grab easily. Have a code word you can text to a trusted friend or family member that means, "I need help now." Plan your escape carefully, because leaving is often the most dangerous time. But know this: you can leave. You can survive. You can heal. I'm living proof of that. 2 years ago, I was convinced I'd never escape. I thought I'd either die at his hands or spend the rest of my life in that prison of fear and violence. I couldn't imagine a future without him, without the abuse, without the constant terror. But here I am, living in a beautiful apartment in a new city, teaching children who make me laugh every day, having coffee with friends on weekends, going to therapy and processing my trauma, dating someone kind and gentle who would never dream of raising a hand to me, building a life that's entirely my own. Yes, I have scars. Yes, I have triggers. Yes, I sometimes wake up from nightmares where I'm back in that house, back in that hell. But those moments are becoming less frequent. The healing is happening, slowly but surely. And the most important thing I've learned through all of this is that I'm stronger than I ever knew. We all are. Every single survivor of abuse is incredibly strong because we survived. We endured. We kept going even when we wanted to give up. That strength doesn't disappear when the abuse ends. It stays with us. It helps us heal. It allows us to rebuild. It turns us into advocates, into warriors, into survivors who can help others find their own strength. So if this is your story too, if you're living in fear right now, please know that you have that strength inside you. You might not feel it yet. You might feel weak, broken, defeated. But you're not. You're surviving the unsurvivable. And when you're ready, when you find the courage to take that first step toward freedom, that strength will carry you through. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved gently, kindly, without fear. You deserve to make your own choices, have your own opinions, live your own life. You deserve to wake up without dread. You deserve peace. Don't let anyone, especially not the person hurting you, convince you otherwise. My ex-husband spent 3 years trying to destroy me, trying to convince me I was worthless, that I deserved the abuse, that no one else would ever want me. He almost succeeded. There were days I believed him, days I wanted to give up. But that doctor, that nurse, that advocate, my family, my friends, my therapist, they all reminded me of my worth. They saw value in me even when I couldn't see it in myself. They believed me. They supported me. They saved me. And now I'm paying it forward by sharing my story with you, by telling you that escape is possible, that healing happens, that life after abuse can be beautiful and peaceful and full of joy. That doctor's decision to look closely at my injuries instead of accepting the lie we were told saved my life. His refusal to turn a blind eye gave me the chance to finally tell the truth, and that truth set me free. So I'm asking you, if you're in danger, to give yourself that same chance. Tell someone. Ask for help. Take that terrifying first step toward freedom. And if you know someone who's being abused, be that doctor. Be that nurse. Be that advocate. Don't look away. Ask the hard questions. Create that safe space. Believe them. Help them. Together, we can break the cycle of domestic violence. Together, we can save lives. Thank you for watching my story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing survivors. If this video resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it. Hit that like button so more people can find this story. Subscribe to this channel for more survival stories and resources. And please, comment below with words of encouragement for anyone going through this. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know we believe them. Let them know help is available. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can break the silence that allows abuse to continue. Together, we are stronger than any abuser. Stay safe, everyone, and remember you are worth saving. Your life matters. You deserve peace. Thank you.